Okay, let's unpack this. We have been handed a stack of sources that don't just describe events. They plunge us straight into these life-altering moments happening right now, right across this massive interconnected metro area.
Yeah, they really do.
Our mission today is highly specific. We are performing an immediate forensic analysis of these highly intense, sudden events involving people at critical breaking points.
Exactly.
We have a volatile, drug-fueled individual, his deeply suppressed companion, an elite narcissistic athlete, dedicated staff at a recovery house, and a chaotic, explosive confrontation. It's a lot.
What's fascinating here is the sheer psychological force that's revealed through instantaneous action in these fragmented, often, delusional confessions.
Right.
We are treating these records as literal accounts of real-life occurrences, analyzing the motivations, the sudden and sometimes terrifying shifts in power, and the tangible, sometimes explosive consequences of profound internal crisis.
It's like we have to listen not just to what is said.
Oh, absolutely not. It requires us to listen to what is desperately being hidden, what's repressed, or in some cases, what's being chemically enforced by these individuals.
That's the core challenge. We're dealing with three concurrent high-stakes narratives that will eventually just smash together. We have the nervous energy of an urban walk through a cold November night, a bizarre hotel interview out in the desert, and the grueling night shift at a recovery home that ends violently in gunfire.
So we're going to retell the scenes to give you that visceral experience and then immediately analyze what internal pressures and fears drove these people to their critical actions.
Exactly. Let's start on the freezing streets.
Let's do it.
So the scene is an urban November PM. It's dry, it's brittle, and it's gray. But against this backdrop, the two figures walking they're visually shouting at each other.
They really are.
We have Randy Lenz, and he's practically wearing a costume. A high-end worsted topcoat, dark slacks, and these Brazilian loafers polished to a high-wattage shine.
And then it's all topped with this bizarre disguise that makes him look like an Andy Warhol impersonator who's suddenly gotten a deep tan. It's just a lot to take in.
It is. And then there's Green, and he's the physical manifestation of contrast and repression.
He's wearing this cheesy, stiff, cheap leather jacket that literally creaks with every breath he takes. And it's paired with these heavy, practical asphalt spreaders boots.
You can feel the dynamic just listening to their footsteps, can't you?
Yeah.
The click of Lenz's slick, quick loafers versus the crunchy, slow thud of Green's thick-soled work boots.
Yeah, Lenz is moving too fast. Green is just heavily grounded. He's an anchor.
And Lenz is immediately launching into this breathless, ego-driven verbal torrent. Green, who is, totally silent, he just lights both their cigarettes and offers these little necessary noises of attention and assent.
Just enough to keep Lenz going.
Exactly. And Lenz is immediately reliving a confrontation, a man pointing a gun 5 feet away, where he claims he found his true character.
Of course he did.
He describes this bizarre, immediate calm, telling the gunman, "You fucking better kill me with the first shot, man, and you won't get another one."
And that story is just pure Lenz, isn't it? It's so self-aggrandizing. He's framing an extremely high-risk, terrifying situation as proof of his own superiority and, his unflappability.
But what's the subtext there? What's the real reason he's telling Green this story right now?
I think it's fear. It's a desperate attempt to maintain control. We learned that his breaking point, the mundane trigger for his relapse, was, of all things, diarrhea.
Right, and it was coupled with a nasty verbal confrontation with another resident named Glenn, who was howling about Lenz hogging the bathroom. A totally mundane, pathetic little moment.
But the real problem, the source tells us, it wasn't the diarrhea. It was having to grapple with the truly paralyzing anxiety of finding himself liking Green.
And that is such a key detail. He describes this affection as an all-body wince, like dropping something important and having to stand there impotent, waiting for the devastating impact.
It's a physical reaction to an emotional vulnerability. This internal softness actually enrages Lenz. He feels it, and his immediate reaction is that he has to fix it. He has to kill it.
And that's why he turned to the drug, the cocaine, or Bing, as he calls it.
It becomes his attempt at achieving a kind of medicinal support for assertiveness. His goal was to find that cool, nonchalant verbal sang-froid, a term he likely picked up from some dime store novel.
He totally did.
The perfect chemical state to dismiss Green, assert control, and fly solo in the urban night.
But the Bing backfires. I mean, it backfires spectacularly. He uses a crisp dollar bill, and this is a detail I love, the one he'd intended to put in the meeting collection,
Oh, the irony's just dripping from that, isn't it?
to snort 2 or 3 generous lines off the handicapped head's toilet tank. He meticulously cleans up the residue and emerges feeling invincible. But instead of sangfroid, he gets a huge hydrolistic compulsion.
Let's stop on that term because it's so specific. Hydrolistic compulsion. Think of it as a dam breaking. The chemical pressure forces him not just to talk, but to share every experience, every dark datum, every thought he's ever had with Green.
So it's the exact opposite of what he wanted. He wanted to push Green away.
And instead, he's compelled to pull him in closer than ever. It's an involuntary, overwhelming flood of vulnerability that he then immediately attempts to mask with manic delusion.
And the confessions begin. It's just this rapid-fire dump of his deep traumas, but they're all filtered through his self-made myth.
Right, it's not just the trauma, it's the story of the trauma that's important to him.
He tells Green that his phobic fear of timepieces is rooted in his abusive stepfather, an Amtrak conductor.
And this story's brutal. The stepfather used to force Lenz to wind his pocket watch and then beat him with a rolled-up copy of the incredibly heavy Track and Flange periodical.
So the clock itself became the instrument of physical torture. Time, the act of winding it, became this constant looming threat for him.
He then shifts to the truly bizarre and disturbing. He starts detailing his late mother's spectacular, almost unbelievable obesity, using his arms dramatically to illustrate her scale.
Yeah, he's performing it for Green.
The physical horror he describes is intense, but the climax of the story is the most revealing of his need for a public, dramatic tragedy.
Oh, this is the one that just forces you to pause and just...
Out.
The description of her final injury is so harrowing, but in such an absurd context.
It really is.
She was so obese she had to make her own clothes out of drapes. And while riding a Greyhound bus on a route with notoriously violent bumps, she was using the onboard potty.
And the jostling, the bumps, hurled her out of the seat and wedged her enormous bare backside tightly into the small open window recess.
I mean, you can't even make this up. She was exposed, publicly mortified, and shrieking for help from behind the locked door as the bus continued up Route 24.
She suffered terrible emotional trauma and frostbite, which eventually, he says, netted her a massive 7-figure settlement.
A settlement so large, he claims, that she lost all will to live. She just consumed high-libid pastries brought on gold trays until she ruptured and died with peach cobbler still in her mouth.
It's just the sheer absurdity of the context for such a profound, grotesque tragedy. But for Lenz, it validates him. It validates his unique, horrific background. It makes him special.
Exactly. The stories are designed to make him special, and he confirms this need for uniqueness immediately after, right? He euphorically claims that he regenerated his own finger like a lizard's tail after a mini bike chain accident.
He had to be unique. He had to be above the laws of physics and statistics that apply to common men. Normal injuries are for normal people. Randy Lenz regenerates.
And he also details his, lethal Aikido skills. He used a maneuver he calls the Old 1-2 to demap a pushy, saliva-mongering man in the back bay.
Claiming he drove the man's nasal bone shards up into his brain with the heel of his hand. It's this incredibly violent, movie-like fantasy.
He ends the whole manic torrent with these lurid cult stories. Virtual reality pornography that causes eye bleeding, stelliform cultism, and the story of the grotesque, square-headed infant, a deskulled, hydrocephalic baby worshipped at a Halloween party.
It's just one thing after another, each more insane than the last.
Okay, let's shift back to the analysis, because the torrent shows this deep internal conflict. You called it the enragement of affection. That's the central paradox here, isn't it?
It is. He hates needing Green. The cocaine forces intimacy, but Lenz immediately covers that vulnerability with this huge spray of manic, delusional claims about his uniqueness and his lethality.
He's trying to assert dominance while simultaneously revealing every single source of his deep, deep pain.
But if the whole goal of the coke was to achieve that cool, nonchalant verbal sang-froid he needed to dismiss Green, why does he share the most vulnerable, humiliating stories about his mother? That feels contradictory.
That's the tragic irony of addiction and chemical self-medication, right? The drug accelerates the need for connection, but his psychological defenses are so overwhelming that the connection has to be through a persona.
He has to convince Green that Randy Lenz is too complex, too damaged, and frankly too lethal to actually be liked or cared for. He's pushing him away by making himself grotesque. It's a preemptive strike against rejection.
And what about Green? the silent, compliant partner in all this. We know he suffered compressive trauma. His single visible reaction to Lenz's entire torrent is his face just crumbling blankly when Lenz mentions late mothers.
Yeah, that's the only crack in the facade.
Like,
And we get the horrifying context for this, the accidental death of his own mother on Christmas morning.
it's just an unbelievably tragic story. Green's father, an asymmetrical aerobics instructor turned joke designer,
I mean, what a description.
gave his mother a gag gift, a novelty Mauna Loa macadamia nut can containing a cloth snake on a spring.
And when she opened it, the snake sprang out. She screamed, clutched her throat, and died instantly of a fatal cardiac event, and Green witnessed it. He was there.
And now he carries the raw, terrifying guilt of believing he gave his mother a lethal gift, that he's responsible.
His response to this unmanageable trauma is total repression and dissociation. His pain has been compressed to an igneous point, ready to explode. It's expressed only through these profound compulsory avoidance behaviors.
Right, like avoiding products with the letter N in the name and having a silent, substratified horror of all things Polynesian.
This is why the dynamic works for Lenz. Lenz dictates the entire conversation, sharing every datum of the case of our Lenz, while Green just acts as the essential stabilizing presence, the compliant ear.
Lenz needs Green to stand there, impotent, waiting for it to hit the ground. Green is an unwitting captive of the manic energy, pulled along by the sheer force of Lenz's chemically induced drama.
But Green's silence is not apathy. It's a deep, raw wound that he refuses to acknowledge, and it's about to be triggered in a major way.
The physical click and thud of their unequal footsteps through the brittle urban night just perfectly mirrors the uneven rhythm of their conversation. Lenz, speaking nearly a block for every breath he takes, trying desperately to define himself through trauma and delusion.
A really powerful image.
Okay, let's pull away from the freezing streets and Green's silent trauma and jump across the country to a sterile rented room in Phoenix, Arizona.
A completely different kind of tension here.
This is where elite tennis player Oren Incandenza is embracing the subject, a Swiss hand model. This thread provides such a sharp contrast, dealing with psychological manipulation and concealment in a high-stakes but less physically violent context.
For now, anyway. The atmosphere is one of highly concentrated tactile languor. The source explicitly tells us that Oren's embrace is not driven by love or conquest or glands.
So what's driving it?
It's centered instead on a wide-as-the-sky hope, the hope that this subject will validate him, and a simultaneous deep contempt rooted in his hatred of that very need.
He's stroking her tenderly, conscientiously avoiding thinking about the necrotic snot in her smoking nose. When the entire atmosphere just shifts on a dime, there's a brisk knock on the door.
And her reaction is immediate and extreme. Her face instantly whitens. She pleads that no one must know she is there, stabs out her cigarette, and dives beneath the blankets, just vanishing from sight.
This is a moment of immediate crisis, and it reveals the stakes, right?
Absolutely. The subject is terrified of exposure, specifically of losing her children. The intimacy instantly evaporates, replaced by mutual distrust and extreme defense.
While Oren wraps a towel around himself, she silently retrieves a portable O2 mask with a canister and lies perfectly still, breathing into it.
And this detail is critical. Her other hand is resting inside her purse on a concealed Schmeisser GBF miniature machine pistol. It's not casual evasion. This is an operational state of defense. She was prepared for this.
The man at the door is in a wheelchair, a handicapped man who is identified only as a surveyor, speaking with a foreign accent.
And Oren's immediate narcissistic assumption is that this is simply a shy fan's ruse for an autograph.
Of course it is. Everything is about him. He decides to use the encounter to display clinical contempt, calling the interview pisser and bully in his head, feeling ready to torture the man for a while just to entertain himself.
The survey itself is bizarre and revealing. The legless man asks Oren what he misses from his American life. And Oren's response focuses entirely on television, but not the shows themselves.
No, he misses the rituals and the context of old broadcast TV. Specifically, he misses commercials that were louder than the actual programs, the late-night anthems.
And crucially, the pleasure of being able to sneer at the commercial vapidity of broadcast media. He misses seeing the same things over and over again that everyone else saw.
And here's the core of Oren's psychological defense mechanism. He states that repetition was inflicted by broadcast television, whereas using digital discs for retrieval, where you choose the show, ruins it somehow.
He's discussing the psychological comfort of having his viewing choices, and thus his expectations, mastered and controlled externally.
But why is the idea of repetition being inflicted so vital to him? It sounds like he's outsourcing his psychological control, which is strange for someone so hyper-focused on self-image.
That's the exact mechanism. Oren lacks internal stability, so he generates a sense of superiority externally. By being forced to watch the predictable, repetitive, commercial vapidity that everyone else sees, he gains a sense of objective moral or intellectual superiority. He feels he's above it, that he cannot possibly maintain in his actual chaotic, independent personal life.
So his contempt for the media is actually a defense against his own fear of self-loss?
Exactly. His core motivation is this seduction-acquisition-contempt cycle. He needs the subject to reassure him of who and what he is, that he is the one, but this need instantly breeds fear, which manifests as contempt.
And his searching for multiple subjects is driven by the terrifying memory of what happens when he stops the cycle.
Right. The source notes that he once felt the obliterating trinity of you and I into we, a genuine, profound connection, and it kills what needs it. He fears true connection because it eliminates his defined self, the one.
So he uses this calculated tenderness after coitus to extract their vulnerable pleasure. He calls it his food. And that justifies his contempt for them as weak and needful.
It's a deeply pathological cycle.
Yeah.
And the surveyor, this is where it gets really chilling.
Yeah, Oren realizes later that the legless man had the same Swiss accent as the subject.
Not only that, during the interview, the surveyor looked up at Oren, but then he subtly flicked his eyes past him, directly at the hidden woman and the suspicious humped blankets.
That flicked glance is the crucial chilling message, isn't it?
It's everything. Oren was meant to see it. The interview, masked as an academic study from the Chamber of Commerce, seems to function as both a distraction for Oren and a subtle physical confirmation to the subject that she is being watched, that her cover is known.
So it immediately validates her extreme state of defense. It shifts the interaction from a simple, strange interview to a controlled, dangerous operation where Oren is just a pawn.
He's completely out of his depth and doesn't even know it.
Okay, we jump now across the metro area to the Ennet House Drug and Alcohol Recovery House in Enfield, where the crises are less about machine pistols and more about spiritual growth, conceptual failure, and administrative stress.
Yeah, and this section powerfully contrasts the management of physical addiction with the management of this overwhelming, debilitating conceptual anxiety. The pressure cooker here is academic and spiritual.
Let's look at the grueling night shift of live-in staffer Don Gately. His duties are divided pretty evenly between the picayune and the truly unpleasant. He has to dispense meds, log chore performance,
And clean the women's 2 bathrooms, a reality that smashed his long-standing delusion that women didn't go to the bathroom with the same appalling vigor that men did.
a rude awakening for him.
Yeah. Gately's role is utterly exhausting and demoralizing. He has to cultivate this look of weary expertise to manage the constant tides of innuendo and bullshit complaint generated by 24 bored, street-savvy people in detox.
But his genuine care for the residents is often buried beneath the management of chaos. Despite trying to help Green and Glenn, his biggest, most self-shaming fear is just finding a resident comatose or dead on his shift.
It's not about failing them as people. It's about failing the administrative log. That's what the job has reduced him to.
Meanwhile, the immediate resident drama is dominated not by cravings, but by these high-stakes intellectual crises. First, the higher power conundrum. Jeff D. and Nell G. are torturing the new kid, Tingley, with a classic logical paradox.
They're asking Tingley in the linen closet the unanswerable question. Is the higher power omnipotent enough to make a suitcase too heavy for him to lift?
It sounds like a philosophical joke, but it results in Tingley's clinical breakdown. Gately finds the kid sitting paralyzed in the linen closet, eyes bugging out, just going, he can, but he can, but he can, but he can, respecting the paralyzing limits of the paradox.
It's a perfect illustration of how the abstract principles of spiritual growth, when they're taken too literally or, maliciously enforced, can just short-circuit a vulnerable mind.
And there's a parallel conceptual crisis unfolding with the students at the house.
Right, with Idris Arslanian, the devout Muslim tennis player. He's talking to Mike Pemulis about his experimental training, playing blindfolded, trying to use anticipation by ear alone, a technique supposedly used by an upcoming visually challenged player.
And Arslanian is physically desperate for a laboratory, but he's compelled to continue the discussion because of the academic pressure. He's trapped.
And Pemulis is attempting to simplify the material from Texas Watson's energy survey class for Arslanian. And this is where we hit the core, terrifying conceptual crisis of the entire environment, the description of annular fusion.
The material is intensely technical, but the core idea is simpler and, well, profoundly disturbing. It's a massive right triangular cycle of waste as fuel operating between Montpelier, the Methuen Fan Complex, and Loring Air Force Base.
Right.
Wait, hold on. The concept of annular fusion is that the highly toxic radioactive waste becomes the fuel for the next cycle. Can you simplify that core paradox for us? Because the source material is throwing around P239 and U238, and we don't need a physics lesson. We need to understand the stakes for these guys.
Absolutely. Think of it like a hyper-efficient technological Ouroboros, a snake eating its own tail.
Yeah.
But instead of eating, it's consuming its own waste.
Okay.
The core theory is lifted directly from medicine. The radical idea of treating cancer by forcing cancer cells to give themselves cancer to treat the whole body. The process is designed to feed off the very material that inhibits it.
That is disturbing in its implications. So the waste from the fission process is used as the raw material to fuel the next fusion process. But what is the consequence of that immense efficiency?
The consequence is the environmental block that is causing the students such severe anxiety. The fusion is so greedy, so efficient, that it literally sucks every last toxin and poison out of the surrounding ecosystem. All inhibitors to organic growth are removed.
And this creates the concavity.
Precisely. The concavity is an environment so fertily lush, it's practically unlivable. With all natural inhibitors removed, the ecosystem just runs amok. It forces accelerated phenomena and time in flux.
So the area cycles through overgrown jungle and barren wasteland several times a month because organic growth is completely unchecked.
And the terror for the students is the relativity of time in this extreme organic environment. The idea that the wasteland is equivalent to an incredible slowing down of time. This is what's causing Anton Doucet, another student, literal physical pain and an anxiety tic.
For Doucet, the stakes are concrete. Academic failure means the dreaded boot, the end of his tennis career. The sheer abstraction of the time in flux concept is eating him alive, leading to physical self-abuse. He just cannot reconcile the idea of time itself being relative to the organic environment.
And Gately, observing these residents and students, notes that they all share an idolatry of uniqueness. They believe they are exempt from the laws of physics and statistics. They can only learn the hard way.
The intense abstraction here is almost as destructive as physical addiction. While some are tortured by the craving for substances, others are driven to clinical depression by the terror of abstraction and a crisis of relativity.
So whether you are Lenz fighting the anxiety of affection with cocaine, or Doucet fighting the anxiety of academic failure with physical pain, the underlying mechanism is the same. Profound internal pressure that must find an outlet.
And this is where the threads converge, and all those simmering internal pressures just explode violently right around Gately.
Yeah, this is the climax.
The Ennet house curfew is 23:30 hour, and the most stressful part of Gately's night, the car-moving ritual, happens at 000s. He has to supervise everyone switching their cars from the illegally parked side of the street before the tow trucks, which he calls vultures, descend.
And Gately is already dealing with administrative fallout. He just had to discharge a resident for missing curfew. He goes upstairs to find the last straggler, Lenz.
And Lenz is not asleep. He's doing wired handstand push-ups against the wall, farting in rhythm to the downstrokes inches from another resident's pillow.
It's just teak Lenz.
Gately sees it immediately. Lenz is clearly wired on either Drines or Bing, his mouth writhing in that distinctive, uncontrolled, fish-on-a-gaff way.
And Lenz is babbling the insane story of his regenerating finger and his mother's bus tragedy. Gately knows he has to pull an immediate urine sample and finally discharge Lenz, but the tow trucks are prowling, and he has to manage the rest of the impatient residents.
So Gately gets everyone outside, and in the chaos, he realizes he forgot to move Duniglin's illegally parked VW Bug. Since Gately doesn't have a license, he has to swallow his pride and ask Green, the kid he just chewed out, and forced to give a urine sample to move the car.
And Green, silent and compliant as always, agrees.
While Gately is upstairs with the delirious Glynn, a massive ruckus erupts outside. Lenz, using the car-moving ritual as cover, had wandered off earlier.
And Green, drawn by the horrific luau music, a primal trigger for his deep-seated Polynesian-related trauma-followed Lenz.
Green watches, mesmerized and paralyzed by his dissociation, as Lenz, with the high-kneed tiptoed skulk of a vaudeville fiend, sacrifices Gately's meatloaf, which he just happened to be carrying to a large Shetland-sized dog in a nearby yard.
I mean, why is he carrying the meatloaf? It's just so bizarre.
And the murder itself is brutal and opportunistic, a total expression of the toxic rage Lenz had been suppressing and trying to control with cocaine.
He lures the dog, violently hoists the animal, and brings the knife down across its throat with a motion that causes an arc of splatter, dropping the dog with the meaty crunch of a 32-kilo bag of party-sized cubelets.
And then Lenz yells at the dead animal, "How dare you?"
How dare you, suggesting the dog by simply existing challenged his fragile control. It's a pure psychotic break.
The noise brings out the partygoers, three huge bearded men in floral shirts and lace. The source identifies them as Nucks, Canadians, and they are clearly enraged, wanting to unembowel this craven batard.
And Gately rushes out, still in his moose bowling shirt, and finds Lenz being chased around a modified Montego, while a third Nuck holds the residents at bay with a customized .44 Bulldog special.
At that sight, Gately experiences this profound functional psychological shift.
Yes. His mind clicks into a different, highly competent drive, becoming cool and clear with ferocious good cheer. The world is radically simplified.
All the soul-sucking ambiguity of staff life, the logging, the complaints, the paradoxical questions, it all just vanishes.
The conflict provides massive relief. There is no choice now not to fight.
And Lenz, the narcissist, immediately uses Gately as a human shield, grasping Gately's shoulders and pouring out these torrents of self-interested imprecation, desperate self-serving prayers.
He even pops his head around Gately's flank to verbally abuse the Canadians, calling them Maricomes, cementing his reputation as a sick, gutless USA batard in their eyes. He makes everything worse.
Gately attempts to de-escalate one last time. I do not want to fight them, but the violence is inevitable. His response is a rapid series of brutal, automatic movements, a return to his old, specialized competence.
And the sequence is just shocking in its efficiency. Gately body checks the first two Nucks together. The first one punches Gately, audibly breaking his own hand.
And Gately, unfazed, takes that man's broken arm, breaks it further over his own knee, and forces the shoulder out of the socket.
The second Nuck draws a knife, slashes Gately's calf, but Gately responds with a giant step and a devastating rocket kick that breaks his own big toe but sends the Nuck flying onto the Montego's hood.
But then the third Nuck, the gunman, fires. Gately is punched so hard in the shoulder he's spun around. The thought, "shot in sobriety," flashes across his mind's eye, a strange, painful moment of self-awareness.
As the gunman draws a second bead on Gately's head, Green intervenes.
And Green's reaction is perhaps the most significant psychological breakthrough of the entire night. He was passively drawn to the scene by the luau music trauma, but now he emerges from his dissociated state.
He ignores the pain of his own newly broken nose, suffered when Nell Gunther's paratrooper boot kick sends the gunman's head snapping back into his face, and uses a high-quality half-Nelson to disarm the gunman.
His willingness to sacrifice his physical self for the one person he likes, the person who represents the only true affection he's encountered recently, it overrides his lifelong repression and dissociative state.
It is a raw, instinctual act of violence in service of connection. After a lifetime of avoidance, he finally acts.
The scene descends into total chaos. Lenz, energized by the fight's success, pile drives both Green and the subdued Nuck simultaneously. Gately, kneeling, finishes off the first Nuck by methodically stomping on his face until a liquid crunch is heard, a necessary functional act of termination.
And then, the new, unexpected authority figure emerges. Jo Van Dyne, the deeply whacked-out resident, descends from a skinny ailanthus tree, clad in a black kimono and gauze veil.
She runs over, applies pressure to Gately's bleeding shoulder wound with her folded robe, and immediately assumes command structure.
She smells strange but good and issues these firm, strategic commands: call Pat's machine, distract the drunk EM security guard who has finally arrived singing sea chanties, and most importantly, get him inside before the real ones come.
And in his moment of extreme pain and blood loss, Gately makes the final, vital connection.
Joel's voice is that of Madame Psychosis, the mysterious, deeply impactful host of the no-subscription radio show he loves.
His world just shrinks to that one fact. Gately's biggest anxiety instantly shifts from his life-threatening injury and the administrative logistics to vomiting in front of Joelle.
It reveals the intense, immediate personal connection he feels to this newly established authority figure. It is the quietest person, Bruce Green, and the most fragile personality, Joelle Van Dyne, who provided the competence and decisive structure needed in the crisis, not the delusional, wired Lenz.
Incredible, just an incredible convergence.
So if we connect this chaotic convergence to the bigger picture, these sources show that physical confrontation and intellectual anxiety are simply two sides of the exact same human struggle.
That's a great point.
Lenz's violent outburst, fueled by chemical compulsion, and Doucet's conceptual panic over the relativity of time, they both stem from a profound inability to manage internal pressure and the terrifying truth of their own character, the fear of not being unique or the fear of connection.
So what stands out to you? We've seen that one moment of chemical relief or one moment of finding a jolly calm in extreme violence can radically alter the landscape of a life, leading to broken bones, gunshot wounds, and profound relational shifts.
And we've seen that the deepest trauma, like Green's, can be overridden by an instinctual need to protect the one person he finally cares for.
And the most fragile individual, Joel, can become the unexpected command structure in a moment of supreme crisis. It's about who steps up.
Which raises an important and deeply troubling question, I think, drawing directly from the conceptual anxiety of the students and the angular fusion process.
Okay.
If that process is so successful at generating a fertile, uninhibited ecosystem that it needs constant toxic dumping, the regular catapulting of toxins, to prevent its spread, what does that imply about human psychological growth?
Wow.
Is true recovery and spiritual growth possible without a constant external source of inhibiting toxins, constraint, or controlling structure? Or does the internal self, absent constraint, simply become a hostile, unlivable environment? It's something to consider as Gately lies there, bleeding, finally finding clarity in the face of Madame Psychosis.